Thank you all very much. It's an honor to be with you. It really is. I can tell I'm in Baptist country when the whole front is completely empty. You know, this is, it really, in all seriousness, thank you for taking the time to be here. You all are busy. You have huge responsibilities in your respective communities. A number of you are just winding up, as is the mayor, the final days of service to this Commonwealth. Others of you are just on the way in, some of you right in mid-stride for what will be continued years of service. So thank you. I met earlier with all of the state's county clerks who are gathering for their convention down the road in Louisville, and it said the same thing to them. I thank you for stepping up to serve the public. It is a thankless task at a thankless time in our history, and yet it is as critical as it has ever been. It really is. When I was young, I remember my mother once saying to us as kids, she said to me specifically, she said, all you kids are different. I was the second of 6 kids. She said, you're all going to go on to do different things and pursue different careers in life. She said, just make sure whatever you do at the end of every day that you give back more than you take. And to those of you in this room who are in your communities giving back more than you take, thank you. I truly appreciate it. Kentucky needs it like never before. I want to allow the bulk of the time that I've been allotted to answer questions, because this is your time. I could sit here and talk to you for 30 minutes, and if you truly had no questions, I'll share with you some information. But I want to just say one thing briefly, and then we'll open it up to your questions as you see fit. And are you the keeper of the questions? Awesome. So the question whisperer here will tell me things, and words will come out of my mouth. But in all seriousness, I was struck by something as the mayor was speaking, talking about this city and things that have been done. I was thinking even about his company and the fact that it has grown from this small family business into the largest producer of manufacturing facilities in the country. You think about that from right here. I just recently returned from Beijing, where I met with the 50-some-odd employees in the Beijing office of another little company that started here with an idea in a garage and $10,000, a little company called Alltech. There's a lot of things that have come out of this community, out of this Commonwealth. But it's been said, and you've heard it said, that without vision, the people will perish. It's true, very true. And it isn't true just for an individual. It isn't true just for a family. It isn't true just for a company or a state or a nation. It's true for all of them. If you don't have a vision, your odds of succeeding are slim. So what is your respective vision? I would ask each of you. What is the vision each of you has for your role that you play in your respective county? What is the vision you have for your county, the county you represent, the multi-county area that you're a part of, the region of the state you're in, the Commonwealth as a whole? What is your vision? I'll share with you briefly my vision for Kentucky, because I think it will encompass much of what has been done, what is yet to be done, but should give you some sense of kind of the environment in which the questions I'll answer will be dictated by. The vision that I have for this state is a simple one. I'll start by asking you a question. And some of you have heard me ask this question. But if you wanted to engineer and manufacture something, anything, could be an automobile part, an aviation part, it could be pharmaceutical, medical device, anything at all, you need to engineer it and manufacture it to the highest degree of excellence. And if you had to do that in a single country in Europe, from beginning to end, what country in Europe first pops to mind as a place you'd likely go? I mean, Germany. A few of y'all yelled out. I didn't hear anybody yell out anything else. Now, you could do it in any number of other countries. You could do it in Australia, or in Austria. You could do it in Switzerland. You could do it in France, in Italy, and any number of places. But Germany comes to people's minds because they have for decades, for generations, not only engineered and manufactured great products, but created globally the perception that that's where it's done in Europe, because it has been. I asked that same question of a group of people recently in China, a few months ago in Korea, and other places around the world. And invariably that is, in fact, not invariably, every time that's always the number one answer that I get. So globally it's known. Germany is where you'd go in Europe. If I ask you the same question, if you wanted to engineer and manufacture something to the highest degree of excellence, you had to do it in a single state in the United States of America, Where would you start? It's not as easy. It really isn't. Many of us would say and want to truly believe that it is here in Kentucky. And while we might be one of the first 10, 12, or 15 names that would come out of people's mouths, and if asked to be written down on a piece of paper, we wouldn't be as instinctively the first as is Germany when we ask that question. There's easily 10, 12, 15 states that could arguably make that claim, ourselves included. This tells me two things. Number one, nobody owns it. Nobody owns it like Germany owns it. And if nobody owns it, it's available for ownership. And Kentucky's going to own it. That's my vision. It's not a complicated one. It's one we're already well on our way to accomplishing. I hope you believe this. I hope you understand it. I hope you see the record amounts of capital being invested, the amount of buildings that are being built where manufacturing is taking place, the fact that increasingly the metals of America are being produced here from the smelter all the way to the slitting and the fabrication and the welding. The heat treating, annealing, the hot rolling, cold rolling, the forging, all of this is starting to concentrate here in Kentucky. And guess what? Those materials are being turned into the goods that are resulting in record exports from this state. In the last 3 years, almost $80 billion in exports in less than 3 years. These kind of things are happening. It's not just things we make, it's our ag products and services as well. But the backbone of this state is based on where we are, who we are, the cheap electricity rates, lowest east of the Mississippi, the central location, the four seasons, the quality of our workforce, the low cost of living, the high quality of life, the values and the work ethic. These are the things that the world is looking for. The logistical hubs of UPS and DHL and now Amazon, their prime air hub, all these air hubs right here in Kentucky, reaching the world every single day, overnight to every corner of the world, with over 1.5 million packages a day and growing. These are the reasons that you, for any number of dollars, couldn't recreate so much of what we have. There is no state better positioned than us to be the center of engineering and manufacturing excellence in the United States of America. There is not. There is no state better positioned physically and with upside opportunity like us. This is my vision, the things that I am focused on, the reason why I'm passionate about getting our financial house in order. And we must get our financial house in order. We cannot keep kicking cans down the road on the pension, on tax modernization, on cutting of regulation, all these things that you know, that you wrestle with, those of you at the county judge executive level and those that work for you in particular. You understand how constrained the budgets have become, how the cost of benefits is skyrocketing and of pension obligations to the degree that quite literally you cannot afford them. And yet we've seen this coming for a long time, and we've known it's coming for a long time, and only now for the first time have we begun to address this with a sense of seriousness. And a lot of people have gotten worked up. A lot of people said the sky was going to fall. A lot of people said they were going to remember all of you who dared to support the idea that we should pay our bills and be honest about where we stood. But I'll tell you who remembered, and it was evident from what just happened at the ballot box. The people that are paying the bills remembered. The people who appreciate economic advancement remembered. The people who appreciate that we're going in a different direction that is not inside dealing and corrupt, as we have seen sadly too often for the last 100 years in administrations of all parties. They remembered. People who say we're charting a new path and we want to stay on this path. This is where we are now in Kentucky. We are rising in a way that we have not historically. We are at the forefront of people's conversations around this country and around the world when they talk about things like economic development, when they talk about things like foreign direct investment, where only 3 states in America have had more foreign direct investment in their states, and all of them are much bigger than us. Per capita, we're the number 1. And there's trillions of dollars in the world looking for a safe place to go, and we want them to come here. We want them to help us fulfill our vision, and they want to. We just need to make them believe. We've got some wood to chop, we do. I said to the group earlier today, it's like being in many of you have grown up in a rural community, as have I. Might have grown up on a farm like I did. It's like cleaning the barn in the springtime. after a long, heavy, snowy winter. It's not fun. No one likes it. The people after us will ride the pony. In the meantime, we're the ones shoveling. And there's a lot of shoveling to do, but that's okay because the future is bright indeed. Let me stop there. And what questions on any fronts would you like me to address?
All right, Governor. You have touched on the economic development component, and we know you were recently in China. I think you were at the air show before that over in Europe. When you're talking to people from other countries around the world about Kentucky, what we have to offer, what do you say to them? What do you tell them about the assets that we can bring to their business venture? And one of the questions was specifically about rural Kentucky.
I talk about exactly what I just said a moment ago. And I'll tell you what, I have a passion for this. Abraham Lincoln, who was born here, as you know, he said, "Good things may come to those who wait, but only the things left behind by those who hustle." That's a great quote. I hope you live that quote. I hope you believe it. And indeed, I am out hustling every single day on behalf of the Commonwealth. And the things I say are the things I just mentioned. I talk about those things that I just said, but also the fact that the riverways and roadways and railways that transect through North America and through the United States come right through the heart of Kentucky. I talk about the fact that we're one day's drive from more than 60% of this nation's population. I talk about the fact that we have 4 seasons, but none of them is too extreme. The fact that we don't have the extreme heat or the extreme cold. I talk about the fact that we have a ready workforce that is able and willing to work, especially in some of our rural communities, especially in those that have been decimated in recent years by a downturn in the coal economy. We find ourselves with more than 10, 12,000 people in the last 8, 10 years having been laid off in that one industry alone. I talk about the high quality of our metal fabrication skills and our electrical skills, where we quite literally in the eastern part of our state have between 2 and 8 times the national average of people with a dozen different skills that people in the aviation industry specifically are interested in. And that we have people who, when they're able to be trained, are ready to go to work immediately and want to. I talk about the fact that these are people who are loyal, that they want to stay in their communities, and that if businesses come to us and build where we are, they will have not just that employee, but they will have generations of loyal, hardworking employees. We've seen it time and again. This is what I talk about. And I'll tell you what's interesting. I did just go to China, where they had the first ever China Import Exposition. First nation in the world to do this. They invited people from 130 countries. And their president, President Xi, said, we're going to be buying in the next 10 years $30 trillion worth of goods and $15 trillion worth of services. You come and make the case to us why we should be buying your goods and services. And people came from 130 different countries. They invited every single elected official in the United States, come and make the case. You know how many governors went? 1. I was the only one. You think we're not just shooting fish in a barrel? You bet we are. And I'll tell you what, I met with, among others, 5 of the 8 Chinese companies that currently employ people in the state. There's 8 different companies who employ about 8,700 people. 2 of the largest Haier bought GE appliances. They're investing hundreds of millions of dollars on top of the billions they paid. They're saving that brand that was dying and was going to be jettisoned by GE, and they're turning it around, and they're hiring, even as we speak, 400 more people in Louisville from surrounding communities coming to work. They're good jobs, good benefits. I talked to them about how we can make it easier for them to continue to expand. You know what else I did while I was there at their headquarters? I met with 6 or 8 different suppliers of theirs, people who supply products to them, and made the case to them, why not come and build your factory right here in Kentucky, where you can give the products that they need for their production right to them just in time, right down the road. These are the things that I talk about every single time I'm out there. And I'll tell you what, I was the only governor to go when Bloomberg opened their offices in New York City 2 years ago. It invited 200 potential investors from China and said, including Bank of China, China Investment Corporation, and others. And they said, we want every governor in America was invited to go and speak to a room full of 200 Chinese investors who represented hundreds of billions of dollars looking for a place to go. You know how many governors went? One, me. I was the only governor that was invited by Goldman Sachs and the China Investment Corporation. There was actually one other governor who also was invited to come and speak to a group of folks in Chicago talking about the same thing. Why do I mention this in China? Yes, it's fresh in my mind, but understand this. There's 1.6 billion people in that country. They have 350 million people who are middle class in terms of their earning and buying capacity, which is the same volume as our entire nation. They have that many people who can spend and buy just like our entire country can. Yes, they have another billion plus who can't, but they are rising. And while this is a country of 1.6 billion people, they only have 8 companies employing people here. A little tiny island nation just to their east has over 200 companies here. A country called Japan. 30 years ago, Japan had just a handful of companies here. And if Japan can have 200, why can't China have 300? Why can't Europe have more than they have? Why can't South America? All these people that are looking for places to invest their capital where it's safe and it's stable and there's not the geopolitical unrest that they see everywhere else. These are the things I talk to people about. And I'll tell you, they're believing it and they're coming, which is why we have had, in the last less than 3 years now, all-time record amounts of capital being invested in our communities. The best year we had ever had in our state's history ever was $5.1 billion of capital invested in Kentucky in a single year. That's a lot for a state our size. And yet last year we did 9.2. We've done 17.2 billion in less than 3 years since I was elected. We're just crushing those records. And the reason we're doing it is because people believe. But we have to get our financial house in order. We have to keep doing the things we talked about earlier.
Almost half of our questions center around infrastructure of some sort, whether it be water, sewer, mostly about transportation in the way of highways and roads. Bridges also is coming up a lot. Talk to us a little bit about your vision. I know Secretary Greg Thomas is going to be with us tomorrow, I believe, but your vision on how we tackle the infrastructure needs of Kentucky.
Sure, that's a great question. I will say this. In short measure, there's 2 things that separate us from where we are and where we want to go relative to ourselves and where we will be relative to those states around us and other opportunities around the world. The 2 things that separate us from where we are to where we want to go are education and infrastructure. And education is everything we think of in a traditional K through 12, but it's a whole lot more than that at the front and back ends. It's the post-secondary world. It's skills training. It's apprenticeships. And how do we prepare people for jobs that actually exist in the 21st century? That is the whole point of education. But infrastructure is the other one, and infrastructure is critical. We have, and so many of you realize this, you have debt service that sucks up, for those of you in coal country, the bulk of the dollars you get that remain out of coal severance, servicing debt on things that were built, infrastructure that was built in your communities that serves no purpose or little purpose. It's brutal. We've made a lot of poor decisions through the years in this state about infrastructure. We've built things we didn't need to build. We've spent money where we didn't. We've borrowed on assumptions that dollars would be there to pay that debt back that are no longer there. These days have got to end. And so back to infrastructure. Some of you at night and on weekends now find yourselves on roads where it's unexpected coming to a stop or slowing down, and you wonder what's going on, and you think there's an accident, and it turns out it's just some construction. We're fixing 1,000 bridges in Kentucky right now. 1,000 bridges. Greg will probably speak to that. We have bridges that were built in the 60s and 70s that have never been repaired, never had anything other than a little bit of blacktop on top of them laid down. The infrastructure and underpinnings are falling apart. We have 60 different on-ramps and bridges that have been shut down. That's what we've done historically. When they're no longer safe, we just shut them down and people have to figure out how to get around. This kicking of the can down the road has to stop. My passion is to address this infrastructure need by focusing like a laser the limited dollars that we have. But where do we get our money from? The Federal Highway Trust Fund, which is a finite amount of money we get every year, and invariably we're only able to draw it down based on our match, and we've been using toll credits, which are running out, which means we're going to have to come up with hard dollars, not credits that we've accrued from years past. These are hard dollars that are frankly not available, and yet we're going to have to come up with them because the opportunity cost of not doing it is great because we then won't get all the federal dollars we might get. That's one source. The other is the variable excise tax on fuel. You know this. It's 9%. No one likes to pay it. No one likes the idea of it being more, but where else is the money going to come from? I would encourage you to talk to your legislators about this. Has to happen. Has to happen. The people of Kentucky can handle it. This idea that we can't possibly ask them to pay more, nonsense. The reality is we live in a world where people have to pay for the things they want. And if we want better roads and we want better bridges and we want to fix and maintain the things we have, then we have got to pay for it. It's just that simple. We do. And while it was not, I mean, I will say this, it's a question that may or may not come up, and it only applies to, several dozen of you, probably 36 different counties, directly and indirectly. But I mentioned coal severance a moment ago. The coal severance is important. I've met with, there's a handful of you in this room who've been in my office, some of you multiple times, talking about this issue. I am a big proponent of having more of the control of the limited dollars that are left in the hands of those who can best use those at the local level. I really am. But understand this. Understand this. The reality is almost all those dollars are spoken for debt service. We're under $100 million. Last year was $91 million. We're trending to be somewhere in the 80 to 85 this year. I mean, heck, it wasn't even 10 years ago. In the last 10 years, 10 years ago it was about 285, 290 million. It spiked even from there about 7, 8 years ago. It's over $300 million. And during those years, we squandered it. We did. We're setting some of those monies aside now into a fund that will allow us to be able to basically build something up. But the point is, most of those dollars are gone. I understand even if you got 100% of them, it's not enough. I know that. And this comes back to infrastructure in your communities. Right now, we're spending 15% of the state's budget on debts, on liabilities associated with paying pensions. That's 15% of the entire state budget, and it's ratcheting up like this. In a couple of years, it's going to be 20, and then 25, and then 30%. And trust me, this is becoming an issue, and this all comes back to how we come up with the money. It's going to have to come from the users, but it's also going to require some creativity, and I'm working on things right now as it relates to this state's tax structure and modernizing it and making it comprehensive so that we can do right by people from east to west. The final thing I'll say on this is last year, I looked at our top 50 economic development projects in terms of dollars invested and jobs created, and interestingly, if I look at the top 50, they included the easternmost county, the westernmost county, the northernmost county, and the southernmost county were among those that had one of the 50 biggest jobs. So we are spreading it around, and I hope you appreciate this. The irony is not being someone who's from here, which you were all reminded of when I ran for office. I wasn't just a carpetbagger, I was a Yankee carpetbagger. It's like the most evil kind of all. But the wonderful thing about it is I love Kentucky. I'm here on purpose. I'm here by choice. And I'm not beholden to any one corner of the state at the expense of any other. I love every corner of this state, and I am busting my tail when I'm traveling anywhere in the world or in this country talking to companies that are interested in coming here, making sure they know everything available in every corner of this state.
You've been touching a lot on tax reform, changing our system to be more competitive. We at the local government level, of course, continue to see less and less revenue options, unfunded mandates, other things that are impacting us, the cost of jails, et cetera. You know the list. How do you see county government, local government fitting into a tax reform conversation and discussion, and do you think we would have a seat at the table for that conversation?
Many of you, yourself included, others as well, have already been having that seat at the table, and you know that, and I'm grateful to you. There are a number of you that are not shy about sharing thoughts and desires and requests, and that's great. And I hope you have found that relative to at least previous experiences with administrations in Frankfurt, that you have found open doors and open ears. There's not one of you that's ever wanted to sit down that has not been able to sit down directly with members of my administration, very often members of you sitting down directly with me. I'm happy to do it. I'll expect to continue to have that kind of dialogue. I also come to your communities and meet with you and meet with your people through town halls and through meeting with your elected officials. These are the kind of things that I would expect will continue to go on. But here's the point. We're going to be doing more and more with less. We just are, until we're not. This isn't my intent to just keep cutting. Think about this. At the end of World War II, Indiana, Tennessee, and Kentucky, we were all about the same size in terms of population. We're all about the same size in terms of land mass. We're just about each plus or minus 40,000 square miles. We're all almost the exact same size. We have more arable land than them. We have, as we mentioned earlier, better locations, better water, better infrastructure than they do. And yet they now, over just 2 generations, 3 generations, they now have 2.5 million more people than we do. We're 4.5, and they're 6.5 million, almost 7 million in one case, people. Could you imagine if we had another 2 million people in this state? Could you imagine what just 30 or 40% of them paying taxes would mean? If we had 600 or 800,000 more taxpayers spread across this state, and we got plenty of room for them and plenty of ability to accommodate them, plenty of incredible places at a low cost of living for them to live. Could you imagine? We would have the money for every single thing that every one of us wants if we had another 600, 800,000 taxpayers. So this is why we're doing what we're doing. We're tightening our belt now. We're being efficient. We're cutting ourselves where we can afford to so that we can focus on where we can't afford to cut, so that we can invest in the education and infrastructure that will be long-term, not just for the sake of just everywhere we've done it before, but focusing like a laser, being much more rifle-like and less shotgun-like. And this is going to create confidence in the outside world so that people will continue to come and invest. And when they invest, that $17.2 billion in capital expenditures that is going on in the state, a lot of that is going into infrastructure, into buildings that are being built by Gray and any number of other companies. And what does that mean for every one of your communities? Revenue for your school districts, among other things. People staying in your communities and buying and dollars circulating. All these things come from us getting our financial house in order, being seen as serious on the world stage, serious among our credit rating agencies, serious about addressing our pension crisis. And when people see us as serious, they trust us to partner with them, to invest. And when they invest, we will reap the harvest. Right now, we're planting the seeds, but the fruit will come. We're putting a lot of seeds in the ground right now.
Because of time, I'm going to ask one final question, and it is a softball. We'll let you move from here with that. But here we are in the 3rd year of your administration. So far, what is the greatest accomplishment that you feel that you've had? And
I don't know if that is a softball, because and I don't know if people would necessarily agree, but I'll tell you what I think it is. We're telling you the truth. We're telling you the truth. And the truth stinks, frankly, sometimes. The fact that we passed right to work, as controversial as it was, including with a number of you as individuals and within your counties, I cannot even begin to tell you how transformative that will be. That one thing alone is going to make more difference over the next generations than we have any idea. The reason we are leading the nation in terms of a lot of this investment is because of that and because of all the other benefits I just mentioned. The fact that we are taking our responsibility seriously, the fact that we are the first state in the nation, but need to be because of the seriousness of it, that is seriously addressing the pension crisis that we have. It's created a lot of angst, a lot of people wanting to put their fingers in their ears and say, don't talk about that. These things are all hard. They're not fun. They haven't been enjoyable for anybody involved. These are the things I'm proud of. This is what I ran on. When I ran, if you remember, I was the only person who ran that put in writing what I was going to do. I put out what I called a blueprint for a better Kentucky. There were 7 things. You can go back, Google it up if you want. A blueprint for a better Kentucky. There were 7 things on there. Talked about modernizing our tax code, talked about addressing the pension crisis, talked about bringing school choice to Kentucky. And I'll tell you, for those of you in urban communities, which is a handful of you, most of you are not, in Jefferson County, in Louisville, 7 out of 10 black kids cannot read at grade level, 70%. And I have people over there telling me they're world class and we need to just give more money and keep doing the same thing. It's morally repugnant. It's absolutely inexcusable. And I have people in the teachers union telling us that they're doing a great job. They're suffocating the very teachers who are doing the great job. They're suffocating the students who need the great job to be done. They're suffocating the parents who want the opportunity for their young people. Another thing, and people may disagree, breaking the back of the teachers union in this state as the controlling interest in Frankfort is going to be one of the best things that ever happened for Kentucky. And that has happened, and one of the final nails was just put in the coffin last week. They'll continue to bite, and they will. And when I run, they'll bite like crazy, but there's fewer teeth in their mouth. and the idea that they use their teachers' dues to undermine what's best for this state so that we can maintain power for a handful at the expense of the students and their parents and the choice. These things no one likes to talk about. They're not fun. The fact that we've cleaned the state capitol for the first time since it was built in 1910, we're still in the process of doing that. The fact that we're fixing state parks. We have 50 state parks in the 10 years prior to my being elected. That's 500 years, 10 years per 50 years for 50 parks. Guess how many total dollars we put into maintenance, new mattresses, new televisions, electrical upgrades, paint, just basic anything. How much total dollars we put into our 50 state parks over 10 years? 500 years, $6 million. $12,000 per year per park. You can't even paint a large house or building for $12,000. I mean, the reality is this: we have punted things down the road for a long time. And if nothing else, I'll close with this. If nothing else, we've told people the truth. We've dealt straight on. We're fixing these 1,000 bridges. We're doing things that nobody runs for office saying we're going to bring right to work or school choice or fix bridges. I mean, nobody's ever done it. That's why it never got done. And then people get in and they make promises. Oh, you want free this and free that and more of this and we'll give you all that. People will stand up here and blow smoke, up whatever, and tell you, they'll tell you all sorts of things. Whether you like the message or not, I will always shoot straight with you. I will tell you the financial truth. Let me close with this. I was asked a similar question early on after I had been elected. And I've shared this before. Somebody asked me what it would look like when I was all done, after how many ever years it was. What would success look like when my time was done as governor? And what I said to them, I say again now, and I say to each of you, and some of you in particular communities will understand exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe even in your immediate family, you'll understand what I'm talking about. I said, when I'm done, and as people look back, I want the governors of Tennessee and Texas and Florida and wherever else, I want the governors of those states to wonder why their kids have to go to Kentucky to get a job. Thank you.